talk is going to be a little bit of a hybrid because I run Studio 2. We've been in business in Berkshire since 1994. We do branding for many local organizations, institutions, and businesses. But when I was asked to do this talk, I had to say, branding for artists is a subset. But the more I thought about it, the more I prepared my presentation, I said, okay, at its core, branding has fundamental issues. So I said, okay, branding has universal truths to it. And so we're going to talk a bit about branding on the whole, how I perceive it and how I approach it. And then we're going to talk a little bit more specifically about how I understand artists might benefit from branding. We'll take that part with a grain of salt. This is my brand. I play the accordion. So these things are, I was just saying, my studio does work all across media. So whether it's web or print or video or social networking or photography, those are all areas that we work in and we're either expert in or we seek expertise in. I myself am a commercial artist. It's a label that I'm proud of. I have enjoyed my life as a commercial artist extensively. I'm also a fine artist in the sense that I have collections of work which I have sold as an artist in that sort of fine art context. But I want to talk a second about that distinction. Thank you. Perfect. Because for me, there really is no distinction. I've always felt that the difference between being a commercial artist and being a fine artist is really just a matter of perception. At the end of the day, it's being creative and getting paid for it, and that's the job. Branding. This is my definition of the branding. This is what I carry around when I go to a cocktail party and somebody says, "What do you do?" I say, "We help organizations define their values, vision, and identity across media." That statement is true to what I do, but it's also my first act of branding with you. The brand of Kevin Sprague in Studio 2 is we help organizations define their values, vision, and identity across media. And I'm going to break that down a little bit. You might be familiar with this image. We do all the work for Shakespeare and Company, have done for 15 years or so. This image, in many ways, comprises elements of that quality of value, vision, and identity. The values of Shakespeare and Company are in this image. The vision of it and their identity is all in here in the way that the design is used to express those things. When I talk about values, what do you believe in? What are your core ideas and inspirations? One of the elements of branding is to understand what you stand for. Are you exciting? Are you passive? Are you passionate? Are you quiet? Are you colorful? Are you black and white? Ask yourself these questions as individuals. If you're going to approach your brand, ask yourself, whether it's a restaurant or your art or as a photographer, you know intrinsically what these things are. You might say, well, I like to go out and I like to take pictures of beautiful landscapes. Okay, talk to yourself about those values. Beautiful landscape, you believe in beauty, you believe in landscape, you believe in wide open spaces, you believe in country. Do you go into Pittsfield and take pictures of urban blight? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. Those are values. You need to carry those values inside you so there's something that you can communicate to other people. When somebody says, what kind of art do you do? What kind of creative work do you do? You need to be able to answer them. So think about that. An exercise we use in the studio with every one of our branding clients is what we call wordplay, where we'll sit with a client for an hour or two and we just talk. And what we do is we talk about words and phrases. What are some things that they use to define themselves? What are things that resonate with them? And what are things that are negative for them? You know, for instance, you might say, I really like things that are modern. I don't like things that are old-fashioned. like things that are detailed. I really don't like things that are simple. Whatever those words are. These are some words that we pulled from a sheet. I just do this with a whiteboard with my clients. And these are words that we pulled on a client that we're working with right now on not really a rebranding, but a brand update. And if any of you actually really look at those words, you might be able to figure out who that client is. But you might also know. It's Barrington Coffee Roasting Company. Small batch, focused, fanatical, devoted, obsessed, dedicated. If any of you know Barrington Coffee, you know Greg and Barth, you know where these words are coming from. So these are words out of their mouths. They're not my words. Vision. How do you see the world? What do you see ahead? What are your goals? Vision for me is both a combination of the visual, what you see, how you see. We're visual people. We define things, particularly if you're artists. I don't care what kind of artist you are. You sketch, you think, you imagine, you tear stuff out of magazines, you look at books, you think about stuff, in pictures. So I think about everything in pictures. And pictures is it for me. And so one of the things we also do with our clients is ask them, what do you see? What are images that resonate with you? What are images that don't resonate with you? What works and what doesn't? Now, within your own work, be critical. What belongs to your portfolio? What doesn't? Why is it there? What do you love? What would you do again? What do you hate? Think about that. But also, vision is about where do you want to go? Do you want to be famous? Do you want to be rich? Are you happy? Are you sad? Do you want to grow? Do you want to stay where you are? What do you want in terms of your sort of 5-year plan? Ask yourself that. Because whether you're an organization, a business, or an institution, or an individual artist, knowing where you want to be in 5 years is an important thing to ask yourself. So what's your vision? What's the road ahead look like? This is not an easy process. You're not going to be able to just say, oh, boom, well, some people can, I want to be this. It may be an iterative process. You may need to write it down, sketch it, think about it, come back to it, come back to it, come back to it. You may have to talk to your friends about it. You may have to talk to your spouse about it. Visit that question and revisit it based on those values that we established in the first step. Identity. Identities are sort of the third leg of branding for me. Identity really is the question of, okay, how are you going to express those values and that vision? How are you going to tell the world about those things that you've discovered about yourself? I'm colorful. I'm bold. I'm dynamic. Okay, let's talk about how to express that. This image is from West Side Story, Barrington Stage. I do their photography. What's interesting about this image is the second that I shot it, I knew that this was their brand. I mean, I've known Julie forever. I've worked on their brand for a long time, on and off. But the moment I shot that image, because I know what Julie stands for, I knew that that image could tell the story of her brand. That's why that image is there. This is their identity. And until Julie Boyd comes out and says, musical's not so good, we're going to do serious opera, this image will continue to sell tickets for her. What's the purpose of all this branding talk? It's to make money. It's to be successful. It's to grow. It's to pursue. It's to, and as an individual artist, it's to help you get more out of your art. It's to help you find ways that your art grows within you and resonates for you. So when I look at that image, I think this is an image that helps Julie Boyd understand her art better. So I've assisted her in this sense. So branding can be something about having other people come in and help assist you in that idea of what's my identity, who am I, where am I going? I'm just going to take you through a really quick little case study on a commercial client I have, because we don't actually do branding for individual artists. It's not something that is really in our bailiwick. I think that the values that I'm talking about apply regardless, but I didn't have a good case study of someone I could say, well, here's an artist that we branded and we took them from here to here to here. So this is New England Wine Cellars. They build high-end wine cellars for people who essentially view having wine as theater. These are people who are willing to spend $100,000 to have a room in their house devoted to the idea that wine is theater. They want to have their friends come in, they want to open up some expensive bottle, they want to have a nice event. And these gentlemen who run New England Wine Cellars build these. So I'm just going to walk you through this value, vision, identity, and results model here for these guys really quickly. So for instance, we did our wordplay with them. We examined what are the words that are define both what they do, but also what they produce and who they're in business with. So we looked at all those words that people use. I mean, wine is a rich place for words. And we looked at all that language that people use to talk about wine. You know, elegant and robust and rich and oaky and redolent and wood and lush and all those kinds of wonderful words that people associate with wine. And the more we played with those words with the client, the more we realized that the values that someone who cares about wine cares about are really the same values that they care about when they talk about a wine cellar. In other words, great wines possess many of the same qualities of the grand cellars in which they are kept. This is the phrase that we defined out of the wordplay that we did up here. So this really essentially became the branding phrase that they were able to carry around. When somebody said, well, why should I build a cellar for my wine? We say, because, or why should I have you build a cellar for my wine? What we wanted them to know was that the cellar could potentially express their own character, their own values. Karen, come up. Come on. So this was the first step, just this sort of wordplay step where we go and watch out for the wires. The next step, this is our vision step. What we do, and this is something that you can do. This is images speak volumes. I went through my collection of thousands and hundreds of thousands of pictures, and I pulled out images of wine and socializing and the kind of environment that I thought resonated for me when I was talking about wine. And so these are just a bunch of images I pulled. And but as an aggregate, they start telling a story because there's colors in here, there's values, there's a recurring theme. You know, wine is a pleasant activity. Nobody engages in wine unpleasantly. This is attractive. So from that, we built a color palette. The color palette is directly derived from the colors from the photos. If you go back and forth, you can see, purples, browns, reds, greens, earthy, grape, blue. Again, the wordplay comes into play here. Those are words that we would have pulled out in that list. We would have written down a couple of hundred words. Usually what we do in that wordplay step is we'll actually try to whittle those words down to sort of the top 20. What are the words that you always believe define you? And purple, grape, reds, earthy. These are words that define wine. I don't care where you're from. We worked on an icon for them that just simplified, made a simple statement about wine. And then we basically brought all those elements together into a print campaign. So this became a brochure. These are just spreads, different spreads from the brochure. But you can see the wordplay here: sweet, redolent wood, complex and contemplative, lush and earthy. And there's our sort of branding phrase up front. So we brought the images that we pulled and the colors, and we combined them with images of the sellers as built, their portfolio, which is all that they had to bring to us when we started this process. So we were able to take their portfolio and expand it and give it more vibrancy. So instead of just saying, yeah, you can have this, there it is. We said, hey, if you have this kind of stuff will happen in it. Okay? Because that's what they want. They don't actually, you don't build a house for the architecture's sake. You build the house for the living's sake. So don't get stuck between one and the other. Shelley runs a great restaurant. You don't run the restaurant for the restaurant's sake. You run the restaurant for the customer's sake, for the expression of the joy of making a great meal and the pleasure that people take in it. And so that's an important thing to always keep in mind is what's the ultimate result of your product. Is this branding? A little bit. It's only a tiny, tiny, tiny piece. The funny thing about this, I was putting this together, I was thinking, A lot of people, when you talk about branding, they think, oh, what's my logo? You know, I need a new logo, I need a new brand. Logos are a tiny piece of branding. In fact, for most of my clients, I try to discourage them from designing a logo. It's almost always a giant waste of time. Come up with something that works for you and use it, but understand the values that you created it within before you do it, because otherwise you'll spend a lot of money and time on something that's actually the most irrelevant part of branding. Branding is more than logos. It's telling your story, it's wearing it on your sleeve, it's becoming the embodiment of your brand. Who's this?
Michael Jackson.
Right. What does Michael Jackson stand for? Everybody knows. Because he was actually very good at his brand. He approached his job as an act of branding. To say that I'm going to wear this, glove, I'm going to wear this costume, I'm going to present myself in a certain way, that's branding all the way through, every day. Now, sometimes branding, because of media, gets bound up in the idea of a personal life. A personality. You might confuse Michael Jackson the brand from Michael Jackson the person. I suspect if you were to ask him, you can't now, if you were to ask him, you'd probably find out that his perception of Michael Jackson the brand was very articulate and clear to him, and Michael Jackson the person was probably also relatively clear. But there's a lesson in this, which is, and this applies particularly if you're a sole artist, particularly if you're a sole proprietor or an artist, but it applies also if you're a corporation or an institution. If you can't tell me what your story is, what do you do? Why do you do it? If you can't tell me that in a very short conversation of a couple of sentences, then I'm not going to be able to understand it. If I can't understand it, I'm not going to be able to invest in it. If I can't invest in it, I'm not going to be able to buy it or participate in it. Okay? So branding is telling your story. And we do that in a lot of different ways. Here's some examples. Obama, why did he win? Obviously, because the other guy was an idiot. But did he stay on his story pretty much all the way through? He did. What does Steve Jobs wear?
Oh, a black turtleneck?
You got it. Have you ever seen Steve Jobs not wearing a black turtleneck? Really? No, you haven't. Black turtlenecks are part of Steve Jobs' brand. How he dresses, how he presents himself. He wears that on his sleeve. He wears it every day. Now, I would argue that there's probably 364 days of the year Steve Jobs does not wear a black turtleneck. But boy, when he's presenting at Macworld, he's wearing a black goddamn turtleneck. Think about that, because what he's really saying is that I have a predictable quality. You can have faith that I will appear in the way that you want me to appear. Having a brand is also meeting expectations. Within the artist community, being a brand can be a very outlandish thing. You can be an Andy Warhol. You can literally, your art is your brand, you are your art, and the whole thing is just so tied up that you can barely imagine one being distinguished from the other. There's a lot to learn, though, from that, because, again, I suspect if you were to go and ask Andy Warhol very, very specifically when he was sober, he'd say, no, this is a costume I put on. This is a brand that I put on top of the person that I actually am, who gets up in the morning and eats breakfast and, wonders about how many calories he's getting or something. There is an artist whose name is Coop. If you go to artofcoop.com, there are many examples of this, but this is a gentleman who continuously shows up on my relatively wired radar. He's an artist who does very stylized, sort of Lichtenstein, who's the pop guy? Lichtenstein, right? Great big Roy Lichtenstein style stuff, sort of tattoo-inspired artwork. Huge works. As he's gotten more popular, he's been able to sell bigger and bigger paintings, right? So he blogs about them. He's got his own store. You can buy tattoos. You can do all this crazy stuff. But he's done a fabulous job of branding himself today, in the 21st century. Go to his website, start clicking around all of his stuff, and you'll start getting an idea of who is this guy. Now, maybe the story he's telling you has nothing to do with who he is. though I suspect very much he seems to live this environment he believes in. But he's telling you a story. He's telling it through websites. He's telling it through, blogging and Facebooking and images. One of the things he does that's brilliant is he videotapes himself creating his art. And it may take him a couple of weeks to make a great big painting, and he photographs and videotapes the whole thing, and he puts it up on the web, so the whole time you can watch him making this happen. No, I mean, he does it, he edits it, and somehow or other, you have to go and see. But for an example of someone I think who's doing an awfully good job, and does it have results? Again, we're back to the results. Why do this? Is it just self-aggrandizement? Does it get a big ego? Yes, maybe. Does he sell more art? Yes. Is he making more money? Way more money. Okay? This is working for him, branding himself, telling his story, and sticking to his message. We'll get more into that. Local phenom, Gregory Crutzen. Why do you know Gregory's work? One of the things I would say Gregory is not someone who probably, if you asked him, would say he's, branded himself. But he has presented a consistent theme through his work for the last 20 years. You can't follow the thread of his work and not see that there's a consistent story in there. So again, he's letting his work tell his story. And when it's become popular for him and possible, he's let the work take him on a ride, where the work kind of tells a story too. When he's out here doing, closing North Street to take a picture, he's really basically saying, I'm not sure I necessarily need to do this, but there is value in creating this story that I have to create, close North Street and take this picture. There's value in that because he's created a myth. He's created a brand, okay? And those two things are similar. We're going to get Damien Hirst a little bit longer later, but there's a reason I included him as well. Why brand yourself? Why do this? Your work will not sell itself. I have to say, that's probably one of the biggest myths I entered into the art world with was, if I do good work, it will sell. It will not. It just won't. And I mean, I hate to burst that bubble for those people who still think it might, but it's not true. Relationships sell work. Relationships build market. Branding is part of creating relationships. Opportunity is a kind of conversation you create. In other words, you are really not going to have a good time if you're a business or an artist or you created a product. You will not sell that product unless you get outside and talk to people about it and tell people about it and tell the story behind it. My last one is also kind of painful. I believe that art is a commodity. Art is available at every price level, at every range. What's the difference between, a piece of art that sells for $100, a piece of art that sells for $10,000? Relationships, conversation, community, reputation, and brand, not value. Now, they make the art out of, diamonds. We can talk about value. But if it's one oil painting over here and one oil painting over there, you have to find a differentiator, and it's in this space. It's in relationships. You look at me. So how do you do this? Stay on message, connect with people, tell your story, show your work. You have to get it out there. You have to tell your story. You have to give people a chance to connect to you and your work. You, the individual, are often the more compelling entity in this equation, more compelling than your own work. And that's a difficult thing for people who are inherently shy or inherently sort of don't want that relationship to occur. But it's true. You have to go out and talk to people. And you have to show them what you do. And you have to do it a lot. So, we can talk to the mayor. Come in. Look, there's 2 chairs for you right here and snacks and everything.
Oh my gosh, I thought you had wine.
No, this is educational.
Hey, you guys, I invited
Wow, look at this.
I invited Mayor Jim Roberto to come and greet us because he's
Mickey
got one of the
Callahan
better
is being,
brand.
come over here.
Hi, how are you doing, everybody?
Mickey Callahan's being quiet. Oh, we're going all the way back. I see you. Hey, friends. I won't interrupt, but I just heard that this was happening, and I wanted to come and say, you're at the perfect place, listening to the perfect man talking about a perfect subject, which is stay on message, right? So let's free associate, huh? Are you talking about branding?
I am.
You know, I gotta spend 2 minutes today talking about branding. Think of it. In the year 2001, when Ellen and I moved back to Pittsfield, this was branded as the hole in the donut. And that was Pittsfield. A hole in the donut. Can you imagine how terrible that is to be branded that way in a county that has such incredible riches in nature and in culture? And what did we try to do? We tried to say one thing. Communities prosper if they're creative and they're innovative and entrepreneurial. And communities prosper if really they're tolerant and they're compassionate. So we branded Creative Pittsfield. And you know who led that charge? Megan Wilden. Is she here? No. Oh, Megan, we're going to take notes now. And we worked and we worked and we worked. And every banner you saw flying up and down North Street said creative in one way or another. And we continued on that theme. And now it's time to talk about telling your story. Oh, I just did that. I'm going, but thank you very, very much. I hope you enjoy your evening. I know you're with the pro. Take care.
That's what we love about Pittsfield.
Well, there you go. That's a perfect case study right there. What was it? Best small city in the...
Best darn small city in the Northeast.
Thank you. That's it, right there. Branding message, stay on message. Politics, actually, we're going to talk about politics in a second because, frankly, that's one of those places where branding, staying on message does you a lot. You can, and it can do it both negative and positive. Of course, you can be swift voted just as easily as you can win an election. But in any case, this is the question of how. In a quick, so we're going to talk about tools. And I'm going to break these down a little bit. So tools, the internet, web, social networking, events, galleries, direct mail, demonstrations, teaching, something about disrupting, and we'll talk about aggregators. And I'll get to those in a minute. Oh, and by the way, $14,285 is what we raised towards my $15,000 goal on Kickstarter, which is closing tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. So, anyway, I'll explain that in a minute. Okay, let's talk about the web. The web is a big, mysterious, nasty place for a lot of people. Some people love it. Some people are fluent in it. Let me tell you something about the web. It's not going away. Okay? Single most important thing you can do for yourself is realize that what's going on with the web is not only changing your life and has changed your life, it's going to change it so freaking much in the next 10 years, your head will spin. This is the beginning. This is the very, very beginning of the web. This whole first 10 years we've been doing, this is like when we first started programming Trash 80s back in 1981. You guys know what that means. Yeah, I mean, the web is still, frankly, I was typing today. I was typing an email today. And my fingers hurt because I type so many freaking emails every day. And I'm typing this email thinking, well, this is bizarre. Human beings, speech is considered the single most important trait of being a human being, right? We don't use our mouths to communicate over the internet. Just examine that little sphere for a second, okay? How many people typed an email today? Everybody, right? It's stupid. Your hands are not your mouths. Okay, so you want to have an idea of the scope of time that's ahead of us. The internet will change everything in the next 10 years, and it's all going to happen on one of these. Or actually possibly implanted in your skull, but we'll get there. Pursue fluency. The internet is a language. It is not a technology. It's a language. If I told you that next week, to be a successful artist, to run a successful business, to have a successful restaurant, you had to learn Chinese. You had to learn Chinese. You have two choices. Don't learn Chinese and go out of business. Learn Chinese, stay in business. These are your choices. I can't be firm enough about this. Okay? If you're in the audience, you're saying, the internet, I don't like it, it's confusing, it's boring, whatever. It's Chinese, you better learn it. And fluency is the case. It's not technology anymore. Technology has been washed away. You can now participate in the web by going on Facebook, by Twittering, by using your phone, by sending text messages. None of those really take a lot of technology. They just take a functioning internet connection. So forget about technology. Find ways that the web can work for you. One of the things I say to all my clients is, if you're dealing with the internet and it's hard, don't do it. Find an easy way. If you want to do something tomorrow, you want to sell something on the internet tomorrow, find the easiest way to do it. Go to PayPal, create an account, create a buy now button, put it on your Facebook page, and you're done. You can sell stuff on the web in 15 minutes. Connections matter. The web is a broadcast model now. It used to be a real estate model, and I'll talk about this a little bit more. It used to be that I have a website. Come see my website. Here it is. Woo, it's beautiful. Come see it. Hey, it's all my phone numbers on it.
It's like a plot of land.
Right, it's like a plot of land. You have a little piece of real estate, and some pieces of real estate were big and developed, and some were kind of, not so much. Some people have spent a lot of time making stuff move around in the real estate, None of that matters. It's still there. It's still, it's still nice to have a website. Connections matter. Social networking will replace the web within the next 5 years. Believe me this. Facebook will not be Facebook in 5 years. It'll be replaced by something better. But whatever that thing is, it'll be called social networking. It will replace the web. You'll still have a website potentially. For the first time I saw this about 3 weeks ago in the New York Wall Street Journal. Had an article, and the writer was talking about how to use social networks to build your business. And in that third paragraph down, the writer had a little paragraph where he said, you don't really need a website anymore, but if you want one, you can still make one. But with Facebook now, you can pretty much do this and this and this and this. This is the first time I'd seen that in print in major publication. And that's a signal event, okay? Because we've all been spending the last 10 years trying to build websites. And we're still building websites, and we'll still build them for the next 10 years, and they'll do all sorts of crazy stuff. But connections matter more than real estate, all right? The web's about broadcasting. It's no longer real estate. Broadcasting means I posted something on YouTube. I updated my status on Facebook. I put a picture up on Flickr. I participated in eBay. I did something. Every time you do something on the web now, that something you do over here connects to something you did over here and starts to create a connection. And Google, who rules us all, has determined that they're much more interested in the idea that you're connected than you're full of information. I can have the most brilliant website packed with information, but if I'm not connected, Google says, you suck. You're at the bottom. As soon as I start connecting, I go through the roof. We just finished a 9-month consulting contract with Norman Rockwell Museum where we took their entire internal culture and shifted it relating to all things to the web. So we moved them from a static technology-based model, which is there's a web guy, everything has to go through him. You literally had to submit change orders if you wanted to change a semicolon on the about page. We changed all that. We opened it up with a WordPress website for their main site, put them on Facebook, put them on Twitter, put them on YouTube, put everything out there. The day we launched their site, which was the beginning of October, and every day since then, their search results have been up over 130% from the day we launched it, because they were broadcasting. They started broadcasting. As soon as they started broadcasting, all this traffic that was going on out there about Norman Rockwell, the Norman Rockwell Museum, started hooking into them. It was just amazing. Brings me to statistics. This is my Google Analytics page for my Kevin Sprague blog, which is a totally irrelevant site, which I, put random stuff on. I don't know, but 3,000 people have visited it since September. I don't know why, who the people are and what they've done. But this little chart here, all this stuff is available. It's not that hard to hook into, and it tells you a tremendous amount of information. The net, marketing on the net, for anybody who's done traditional marketing in print media primarily, you run ads in the paper, you do this, you do that, you kind of wonder, well, I hope somebody saw it. And people say, well, yeah, we have a circulation of 35,000 or whatever, In this case, you know exactly who came, where they came from, what they did, how long they spent, what page they went to, all these things. It's pure data. Mine it, look at it. Back to the story, stay with your story. On the web, it's true as well. If you're on Facebook, if you have your blog, if you're Twittering, you have the opportunity as an individual to choose what you want to say. A lot of people say, well, I don't want to use Facebook for my business because I might, people might find, people always talk about, their kids' birthdays and stuff. That's a choice. You can choose not to talk about your kid's birthday. You can choose not to publicize that aspect of your life. The way I try to use Facebook as an individual is I generally try to approach it from how do I use this tool as a way to help those people to whom I'm connected with understand what it is that I'm doing that's related to my story. In other words, if it's about me, the brand Kevin Sprague, doing something that I want you to know about, it goes up on my Facebook status. If it's just me, Kevin Sprague, doing my laundry, no, you don't need to know that. You can make a choice there. If you're taking notes, please Google Kevin Kelly and 1,000 True Fans. Kevin Kelly writes a blog called the Technoratum or Technorium or something. I can't remember. Anyway, just Google him. He is a writer. He's a founding editor of Wired. He's one of these smart Silicon Valley guys. Great article called 1,000 True Fans. Came out with about a year ago. I'm surprised there isn't a book. Basically, he looked at that whole sort of long tail of the internet, which is the idea is that if you create a product, you write a book, for instance. In the old days, your book would be in the bookstore for 3 months, and then it would get shoveled in the back of the shelf, and your sales would drop off precipitously, and then it would die. In the internet age, it's functional. In the internet age, the long tail concept is the idea that because the internet, the opportunity to connect to a product is essentially frictionless. It has no cost. You could have that book available to buy forever. It's always up on Amazon forever, right? There's no cost to Amazon because they actually aren't carrying any physical inventory. So he took that long tail concept and he started doing math on it. He's kind of a geek. And he said, if you can find 1,000 true fans, 1,000 people in your social network who will always invest in you because they value what you do. You design jewelry, you write a book, you run a restaurant, you have a business. If you can find 1,000 people to whom that is just always valuable, maybe it's only worth $10 to you, but it's always valuable. That's the number of people you need to connect with, solidly to make a living at this stuff. And that's a very interesting article. You should read it because I think for artists in particular, it's kind of refreshing to know, hey, there's a number. There's a number here that if I can connect to that number of people, I can potentially make an actual living doing this thing that I love to do. So we just touched on a couple of these things. I know a lot of this stuff sounds, you're like, there are no experts and no rules here. Anybody who tells you that they're expert at social networking, lying. Okay? They only figured it out a couple of days ago. All right? There's a lot of play. I always tell my clients, when you go in this space, don't think of it as work or scary or just play. These are potentially fun tools. They don't work for you, forget them. Don't use it. Twittering doesn't do it for you, don't Twitter. Dig into it a little bit though. Twitter is actually an interesting tool, not from a position of broadcasting, but it's a terrific tool for searching on. If you ever go into Twitter and you go into a little search field, start putting stuff in there that you want to know about. And you'll see real-time conversations happening around the world about something that you want to know about. So if you're trying to find a trend, or you're trying to find a little inside information on a topic or a person or an event, great place to go look for it. Because apparently there are a million people out there going, ooh, you know, that's great. Good for them. All these things tie together. You know, you post to YouTube, you can have it update your Facebook status, and put it up on your blog, you know, it can show up on Flickr. All these things relate to each other, and at some point they become seamless. You can actually make them that way. You can start tying them together. So when you do one thing, it shows up on the other 6. That's the future. There's a couple of different sites. There's a site I use called Posterous, Posterous.com, which you go, you create an account, very simple. It's basically a little blogging account, but you can tie it to all of these other tools. And so then you can actually post by phone or by email or just through Posterous itself, or it actually puts a little thing in your browser so you can actually be on a page and you can blog about that page that you're looking at. So you're like on CNN and you see some article, you can actually just literally create a quick comment on that and say, oh, I think this is really interesting. Hit post, it'll go to your blog, it'll go to Twitter, it'll go to Facebook, it'll go to YouTube if it's a video, it'll go to Flickr if it's a photo file, and 14 other places if you want. You're broadcasting, you're the tiniest channel, you're a tiny, tiny channel, but you're broadcasting. And broadcasting isn't so much about like, hey, look at me, here I am, wee, you know, I'm all shiny. What it's really about is making sure that people, when they go looking for you, can find you. You're improving your visibility. And as a brand, that's the point. This is not worth doing as an individual. Go outside and go gardening. You know, and do something actually real. I'm talking about branding here. You know, people get confused by the two. They think, well, I should be Twittering. No, go for a freaking walk. You know, but if you want to talk about your work and you want to create those 1,000 true fans and you want to create markets, then yeah, get your fingers busy. You know, just for instance, this last week we did a shoot in the studio for a client of mine, and it was kind of an elaborate shoot. She does high-end knitted garments that she designs the patterns for and everything else, and we had a model, and cameras, and all this stuff. And so I videotaped the shoot, just set up a camera in the corner, and after the shoot I whittled it down to sort of like a little 1-minute video of this 5-hour shoot. And I put it up on YouTube. It's been watched like 200 times in like 3 days. And why did I do that? Because I want everybody who knows me, and a lot of people who don't know me, or anybody who Googles me to know, Kevin Sprague takes pictures. Nice. You know, that was a little branding exercise for me. And, oh, he looks like he's pretty good at it. Look, they're in focus and everything. So, oh, and this image here is here for a reason. This is the future. You're branding to these devices, believe it or not. When I go to parties now and people are like, oh, what have you been doing this week? I'm like, oh, look at this. You know, I pull up pictures and I show them on my tiny phone. And if you had asked me 5 years ago, you know, would people be interested in looking at pictures on this tiny phone? I would have said, it's so small. You know, it turns out that people are resolution independent. Okay? People love content. They love content. They don't really care about platform. They'll look at it like this if it's interesting enough to them. They don't need it on a 50-inch screen. It's nice if it's on a 50-inch screen, but they don't mind it like this. So, events. And I'm going to get in trouble here with Leslie or something. I don't know if I'm going to say that here. Gallery, having a show at a gallery as an artist is a platform. In other words, it's just one more significant place to tell your story. It's a place to tell it to a lot of people. It's a place where the environment is controlled, relatively speaking. It's a place where the expectations come. There's, you know, I mean, if you're an artist and you get into a gallery, that's great. Don't stop there. That's just the very start. You have an obligation to show up to the gallery, to be well dressed, to not get drunk, and to stay on your message.
I love you, I love what you just said.
Okay. Because if you're not staying on your message in that critical moment, you've missed a huge opportunity. Because Go to gallery show. What's interesting about this picture? Why did I choose this picture? What are these people doing? Not looking at art. Okay, how many people have seen pictures or gone to gallery shows where everybody's standing like this? Right? Because we all know that going to a gallery show is about socializing, networking, talking, connecting, finding out more, getting the gossip, whatever else. Yes, we do look at the art. Yes, we wander around, but connections and people are what matters. So every opportunity to tell your story, you gotta, and when I was thinking about this event thing, I was thinking, what are types of events are there that you as an individual artist can potentially participate in? Certainly, you know, there are social events, there are causes that you can participate in. There are auctions, there are fundraisers. For me, political advocacy, being a part of Berkshire Creative for the last 2 years, for me has been a huge expansion of my personal network, how people perceive me, how people know me, what they know I'm about. So that was a tremendous opportunity. I didn't know that going into that. I was just interested in changing some language about how we talk about business in the Berkshires. But having that platform to talk about a larger issue, you know, within the context of an event has been very valuable to someone like me. It can be valuable to you. Do not be afraid to get involved. Particularly here in the Berkshires, there's not enough bodies going around for anything that needs to be done. So choose what you want to do, show up and do it, because you will be rewarded. And then Jimmy will come and interrupt your speech. So disrupting. I just want to talk a little bit about that notion itself, because art is by definition successful when it changes patterns of behavior, when it surprises, when it interrupts you know, the expected activity. And I think that not enough artists think about that aspect. And it's not that your work necessarily has to be disruptive itself. You don't have to do, you know, 40-foot tall nudes on the sides of buildings in North Adams in order to, you know, get somebody to pay attention. I think that the task is trying to make sure that you have thought about, is there a context in which my work can be more expressive than itself? Is there a place where it could be seen where it was unexpected, or found where it was unexpected? The Storefront Artist Project was very successful for that very reason, because suddenly you could see someone painting in a window where you really didn't expect them to be. It was disruptive. It disrupted the whole discussion about what it meant to be in business in Pittsfield, what it meant to have lost your job at GE, what it meant to have England Brothers closed down. I mean, it changed the whole discussion. It took decades. It's taken a long time, but it was disruptive. Be willing to perform. I mean, this is the sort of thing that I was talking about what this guy Coop does, which is, you know, people like watching people make art. It's more interesting than what they're doing, you know? So bring it out in the open. Show people what's it like. These are the Silver Swimmers at Third Thursday, who I just love because they have, as much as I can tell, no absolute purpose, but they're extremely disruptive, you know, and fun to watch. And my last point here is, it was initially noteworthy equals press-worthy, and I said, no, press is dead. Viral-worthy. Who photographed you, who put you up on Facebook, who videotaped you, who put you up on YouTube, who passed the word around like this was an interesting thing that I saw. That quality of communicating and connecting, you need to create opportunities for that quality to happen. And I know a lot of this sounds uncomfortable to people. Again, I'm not saying you have to do these things. I'm saying these are possibilities if you are actually serious about becoming successful commercial artists. And commercial in the word of making your living at it. Okay, not in the word of the difference between commercial and fine. Okay? You don't have to do these things. This is obviously upsetting, you know, that the idea that, oh, I have to do these things. No, you don't. This is just how I would do it if I was doing it. Aggregators. I brought this in because one of the things that people have sometimes a difficult time remembering is that other people who are better funded than you, like by a factor of like $1 billion, have built very robust platforms that you can take advantage of. There is absolutely no reason if you are, if you're a crafter, okay, you make handmade jewelry at home. Don't go building your own website. Total waste of time and money. Go to Etsy. Create that, you know, I mean, if building your own website and telling your story helps, fine. But in terms of commerce, you're going to connect to a far larger group of people, both on the buying and selling side, by going to one of these aggregators than you'll ever will on your own. Leslie really turned me on to this a few years back because she introduced me to the woman who ran the Artful Home and the guildsourcebooks.com here at the gallery. And there was this was 3 or 4 years ago, maybe longer. 3, yeah. And it's, I'd never heard of it before. Largest direct artists to consumers online marketplace in the world. Okay? And these guys have spent $25 million.
52.
$52 million. $52 million building a robust e-commerce system to allow you to sell your artwork to people directly. And I signed up with them and put my work up on there. I do a limited edition prints. I can show you in a little bit. And they sold for 2 years. I was just, you know, every week or two, I'd sell another $1,000 worth of prints. It was just like, all I had to do was roll it up in a tube and ship it out. You know, I mean, it was, did I make a living at it? No, but did it enhance my bottom line? Yes, and if I had actually paid attention to it, would I have done better? Sure, but it's not my primary job. Great aggregator, look into it. Don't think that you're going to put up your own website and sell your own stuff. It's not going to work. Kickstarter is an interesting project website that is used for essentially crowdfunding projects. In other words, you create a project, you put it up on their site, and what they do is they create a way for you to raise funds towards that project. And in my case, I have a book I wrote called Imagining Shakespeare, which is a sort of 15-year retrospective of all the work I've done for Shakespeare and Company. It's 284 pages. It's all color. It's complete vanity press, you know, activity. In my case, no publisher is going to be interested in it. It's too narrow. But in order to produce it, in order to get a couple of thousand copies of this thing, I needed to raise enough money to print it. And so I went to Kickstarter. I created a project to raise $15,000. I had 90 days. And I used every social networking tool and website and favor I could. And it closes tomorrow morning, and I only have $700 more to raise, and so we'll be easily taking care of that between now and then. But in any case, it's a very interesting model for certain types of projects. You have to reward people. You have to give them something. This is, you know, you've got to exchange value. We'll talk about that in a minute. I don't remember what the last one is. All right, so target markets. Target markets. When I saw that topic on the tricks of the trade thing, I was like, oh boy, target markets. What do I know about that? Target markets. In the case of this sort of art question, you can do a lot of research into markets. It doesn't, you know, if you're living in the Berkshires is a tricky place to be an artist. Why? Population. Okay? At the end of the day, there's only, you know, 60,000 people here, plus or minus, whatever. And it's not New York. It's not Boston. You don't have a marketplace of 20 million people or 500,000 people or whatever. It's a small market. And you start breaking that down to people who have disposable income, who have the ability to drop some money on a piece of artwork. It's getting to be a pretty small handful of people. So you have to do the first sort of due diligence with that. What's the size of my market? Who am I trying to reach? You know, you don't want to be in a position of trying to sell refrigerators to Eskimos. It's just, be realistic about that. Who does your work appeal to? Who in your market would be potentially interested in your work? Be realistic with yourself and ask that question. There's no way I can market test that for you ahead of time. But I think it's fair to say you can market test it among your peers and probably by talking to gallery owners and talking to other people who might potentially market your art. How to price your art. You know, should you do limited editions, unlimited editions, one-offs? These are all questions people ask. I've sold artwork at unlimited editions and individuals and everything in between. And they've all made money in different ways. But you have to look at your work from a commercial point of view. That price point and editioning is an important aspect of how you will make money. In specialized markets, we're going to talk about that in a second. I'll get to that. So, doing some research, part of the research is actually asking yourself, what is my true geographic range? If you're someone who has the ability to travel, has the ability to go to shows, has the ability to carry their product to other markets, then you've expanded your range. If you're someone who can't do that because of either financial reasons, family reasons, or you just don't want to, you've just restricted your range. Do the math, figure out what that market is. Sienna and Leslie both take their artists to SOFA Chicago and SOFA New York. They down to Miami. They travel. They take their work out of here and they take it to other places where there are a lot more people with a lot more money. They have to. So learn from that, because expecting your small local market here to do all the heavy lifting is likely unrealistic. Unless, again, another place where you can expand your market is going online. Going into some of those aggregators opens up your market exponentially if you work it, if you network. Venues, there's galleries, there's fairs, there's selling on street corners, there's selling in restaurants, there's selling online. Figure out what those different venues are, what's realistic for you from a fulfillment point of view, how you're going to deliver, how you're going to protect and price your work. And, customer demographic, I think, kind of goes back to the question of who's interested in your work. Is your work have a particular flavor or style that's going to restrict it in terms of age or social range? Be realistic about those things. Ask yourself, what's going on with that? I'm not sure why I put this picture here, but I like it. Actually, I put this picture here for a reason, because this picture sold. Typically for me, images that have representations of people, figurative representations just don't sell. People are not all that interested in having figurative representations in their home of people that they don't know. There's a piece of market analysis I've learned by having sold work and seeing the landscapes sell, the nudes don't. Hey, you don't have to do that too much before you realize, okay, more landscapes, less nudes. This was sort of a crossover. Think outside of the box when it comes to who might sell your artwork. In my case, almost all of my sales have come from what I would have thought were almost non-traditional channels, or very commercial channels. I sold a lot of limited edition prints through interior designers, commercial art buyers, people who buy work for hotels, hospitality, and interior work around the country. I sold a fair amount of work to businesses for display. And in fact, this piece of artwork here is in Lancer Muellen's office down in Great Barrington. It was sold not only to him as a piece of artwork for his office, but it's also a core element of his overall brand. So it was an image that we brought in to help talk about his brand, and then we actually took those images and put them in the office as fine art. So these were ways that were essentially very non-traditional, but yet resulted in the sale of artwork. So I just think you have to step outside of the idea, well, I can just get in Leslie's gallery, I can sell some pictures. Step outside that. There is a lot of opportunity to connect to people. I had a contact the other day who was interested in staging homes for real estate buyers, right? In other words, there's all these homes that are for sale and they don't look great. So, can we hang up your artwork in those homes while the thing is for sale? Now, does that make any money? No, but maybe you can rent it to them, or maybe something sells. I'm just saying that there are alternate venues here. Building your market, maintain your portfolio. One of the things that just breaks my heart is the number of people who come to my office as commercial artists without a portfolio. I don't care where you went to school. I don't care what your grade point average is. I don't care who you studied with. If you don't have a portfolio, you got nothing. Care about your portfolio. The care and feeding of it matters. Talking about your work and not being able to show it doesn't help. This may be a commercial artist thing, but I know in the fine art world it matters too. You've got to be able to show it. Tell us what you're doing. Tell your story. Continue to tell your story. Blog about it. What's interesting? Why are you doing it? What's the creative process? Did you sand down your canvases after they sat outside all night? Why did you do that? What happened? Show us a picture. Customer service. This is something I learned when I was doing a lot of sales through the Artful Home and through commercial art buyers. They need me to ship that today, overnight, and they want the FedEx shipping form. And I mean, this is a job. This is not. There's no wiggle room in here. If you say you can ship it within 2 days, you have to ship it within 2 days. Otherwise, you're looking at a giant fat, refund coming, the wrong way. So, and that's a space I think that a lot of people who are working at being an artist neglect, is that idea of customer service. This is a business just like waiting tables.
Better.
Yeah. Networking, past success is the best indicator of future success. Who you know is going to lead to who you know is going to lead to who's going to buy your art. And that goes to the next point about referrals. I don't think I've ever sold a valuable piece of artwork without a long, healthy relationship that was built over time. And you can build those relationships and build them and build them and build them. But they take care and feeding and attention. So just a little bit more of this. Listening to customers, be flexible, develop your work, develop your story, evolve. I put this in here, connecting the big concepts and ideas. Big concept, big idea, okay? One of the biggest. But having a big idea is what makes you an artist, as opposed to somebody else. Because part of that big idea is, I have something in my head, I want to get it out, I want to show it to the world. You need to embrace that the scale of that matters. The bigger the scale, the more ambitious you are, the farther you're going to go, because people are going to embrace that vision if you stay on your story and you stick with it. These guys, how long did they work on this Gates thing? 30 years, 20 years, We want to put fabric up in Central Park. And they just stuck to that for 20 years. No, we are going to put fabric up in Central Park. I mean, you've all seen the stuff that went on around this and the controversy and the blah, blah, blah. When they put fabric up, they took it down, it was fine. They stuck on there, they stayed on their message, and they had a big idea, and they reaped the rewards. It cost them a lot of money, but believe you me, they're doing just fine. Be ambitious. This is a hard one to learn. It's hard for me, it's hard for anybody, because there's tremendous risk involved. It's an entrepreneurial act to be ambitious, I put this here because this is a really interesting thing. You may know the story about this crazy diamond-encrusted skull that Damien Hirst did a year ago. Single most expensive piece of artwork ever created. It's $25 million of his own money. Okay, money he raised in his own money. Now, it got completely blown out of proportion in the press and all this stuff, and the money and the expression of it, and he's kind of a nut, and floating sharks and formaldehyde and all this kind of stuff. The guy is on message and on brand. His brand is, I'm a freaking nutcase. Okay? Pay attention. And what I thought was really fascinating was I was working on this presentation, I was flipping around, and I remembered that skull. I don't know why I went looking for it, and I found this quote, which I thought was great because he says, I just want to celebrate life by saying in hell with death. Is there a better way of saying that than taking the ultimate symbol of death and covering the ultimate symbol of luxury, desire, and decadence? He rehearsed this phrase, folks. This is his brand for this piece. This is not some thing that he came up with randomly at a drunken party to a Rolling Stone editor. You do not come up with these words without rehearsing them and writing them down, because I've done it, and he did it. And I thought that was very interesting, because again, a case almost like going back to that Michael Jackson thing, he thought about this. This was a deliberate act of ambition. So there's something to learn here. I don't know what. But it's... So that's kind of it for me on target markets. My main thing is creativity. I think creativity is a muscle that you strengthen it by using it. It gets stronger and better the more you work at it, the more you play with it. It's not talent. I don't believe in talent. I think talent's a bunch of hooey. With the exception of someone like Mozart, who happens to be born that way, these are things you can learn. You can learn, you can learn, you can learn, you can keep learning. Explore what you're curious about, and then do it. Only the doing matters. So I just have 3 quick little case studies, then I'm done. This is this Imagining Shakespeare project. I used Kickstarter.com to raise $15,000. Basically, for $25, you pre-buy a book for me. And once I get the books actually printed, and sometime in February, they come from Hong Kong, and then I can send you a book. But this was an interesting exercise for me because of the amount of intensive social networking it took. When I talk about that sort of 1,000 true fans element and connecting to those people who support your work, if I had just printed the books myself and I had a pallet with 2,000 books here, it would have been a tough sell to make $15,000 off those books. It would take me years. And I expect it will take me years to get rid of them once I get them. But
how many investors did you have for that?
about 200 and something right now.
Okay. And how many books did you have printed?
Haven't printed them yet.
How
Going
many
to.
will you have?
Probably like 2,000 or 2,500.
Great.
So there'll be plenty of books for sale, and they'll be at a reasonable price point. The whole thing essentially underwritten. But what was fascinating about this was my relationships. If I had 1,000 people come in, we would have this whole thing done in a couple of days. But it took 90 days, and my 200 true fans, if you will, came through on it for me. So there's a lesson for it in me, which is I need more true fans. And so I need to work at it, for the next time I need to do this. But what was fascinating about this is that for every person who said, here's $25, I'll buy a book, there were 5 or 6 people who said, the book's great, send me the book. Here's $100 because I believe in what you are saying. I believe in your message, and I believe in you, okay? That's the difference between the commodity value, here's a book, it's $25, and the art value, if you will, the relationship value. That suddenly I was selling books that you could buy for $25 for $500 because there were people out there with whom I had created relationships. So this is not really art so much, though it's an expression of art, and this is how I commercialized it.
Hey Kevin, before you move on, did you go and, I sort of been following this project of yours, but did you compare this to anybody who's used Kickstarter for art? Because I kind of got a glimpse of it, and it looks like it's a pretty successful model for people to use.
I think it's very much dependent. As much as I can tell, the projects on there that have been successful are entirely successful. I would say 90% of them are successful because of the relationships that people had moving into the project. There are a number of projects in there that are successful for their own merits. In other words, there's a book that raised like $70,000, which is the photo essay of Obama's campaign that the former director of the Obama campaign put together with 40 photographers. This is a book that should have been published normally. They chose to do it this way, and they ended up overselling it because it was a popular product. I haven't really looked hard at a lot of the artist initiatives.
I think I looked at one this morning that somebody was like looking for $2,000 and got it in like 90 hours. you
Right.
know, and it was
Right.
basically selling out an edition of, you know, but it was using all these tools that you've
If you
been
go
talking
back,
about.
if you went and asked that person, now that they're done, and said, of the 73 people who supported your project, how many of them are your friends and family? And that person will tell you 70. The act of asking in this case was very hard for me. It's not something I do. People ask me, I don't ask them. And so for me to actually sort of put that out there and say, do this for me, was difficult. But on the other hand, because I don't do it very much, I'm not a nonprofit coming up and hitting you for a donation every 3 months. Because I don't do it very much, there were plenty of people out there who were ready to support me in this concept, you know. And I gave them something material. I think if I'd said, send me to Venice for a 6-month sabbatical for $15,000, I don't think I would have had as easy a time raising the money. And it wasn't easy, you know. So I think there is a sense of
Does Kickstarter give you formulas, forms, ways of asking, ways of dealing with this?
there's a lot of helpful
process.
information on it. It's a somewhat nascent technology. They have some bugs, but there's a lot of information. There's things that have failed. There's things that have succeeded. You kind of have to just go in and start reading. For $100, you get 4 books and me playing the accordion by YouTube. So that was very popular. For $125, you get 4 books and you don't get the YouTube.
Does
That was also
Kickstarter,
reasonably popular.
does that have the networking capabilities of Posterous? I mean, does that have ways of tying in with Twitter and with Facebook so that you keep everybody posted on how much you're raising, what your project is all about?
Basically, it in itself doesn't broadcast effectively. It'll broadcast to the group of people who have signed up for you.
Okay.
But you can blog about it, post about it, Twitter about it, Facebook about it, till the cows come home. I mean, basically, if you look at my Facebook feed for the last 3 months, it's like, give me money, give me money, give me money, you know. And so it's right there, and they encourage using video to update your project, and so there's quite a bit of that built into it.
Perfect.
It's a very interesting thing, but it's a lot of work. This Postmarks is a series of limited edition G-Play prints that I started selling back in 2001. I just did them for fun, and they kind of attracted people, and I've done like 14 or 16 different prints. They're 24 by 36. And they just sell. They just sell and they sell and they sell and they sell, you know. Because, if you will, going back to that target market question, little sofas, they look fine in the bathroom. They're not terribly aggressive. There's no figurative elements in them. They have a kind of they're basically floral pictures I have, flowers overlaid with antique postcards. And it was just kind of a happy coincidence. But this is a case kind of the work informing the process. And I've had a number of quite a few interior designers and commercial art specifiers who contacted me and said, hey, can you make that 6 feet tall, 3 feet wide on canvas, and can you do this size? And I was like, sure, for a price. And so being flexible and doing some customer service there has been definitely very useful. These are Tidal Forces, was a show I did back in like 2003. It was 6 images of water and architecture interacting in the wrong ways. It's been in a couple of gallery shows. I sold these as single edition prints for what was for me a higher value. And what was interesting was I just sold one of the prints literally a couple months ago to someone who had started talking about buying it like 5 years ago. So sometimes time is your friend. But you know what? I kept it hanging up in the studio. So every time she came in, she looked at it. Every time she left, she looked at it. So it was just a matter of time.
Does
And I
a
was-
single edition mean that was like one image of it, or you just printed for one customer?
I've only made one print.
One print,
Yeah.
that's it.
Would I make another print for the right amount of money? Probably, but that hasn't come up. So here, just in summary, know your values, leave your message, build your relationships, use technology, it's not that scary, and be authentic. I think that's an element of that kind of goes with that core value question. You can't be someone you aren't. You know, you can't be Andy Warhol if you're not Andy Warhol. You just can't pull that off. This is my brand right here. As a creative person, beauty, honesty, energy, generosity, beautiful girls and flowers. That's it.